Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new visual showcase episode of the EU Review. I'm your host as usual, Nathan P. Butler. And let me present to you the fastest hunk-a-junk in the galaxy. That's right, this is an old school vintage Kenner Millennium Falcon toy from my youth back when I used to play with it on pretty much a daily basis. Now, fans of the Millennium Falcon have finally gotten to learn a little bit about the backstory of the vessel and all of its previous owners other than Han Solo and Lando Calrissian through the book, aptly titled, Millennium Falcon by James Luceno. This serves as a sort of prelude to Fate of the Jedi, and in the process manages to tell us all about pretty much every owner the Millennium Falcon had during its many years of service. It has storylines that take place in many parts of the relatively recent EU leading up to the course of the films, and really with the exception of an ending that is really kind of a lackluster Maltese Falcon type of ending, which I guess is what it was meant to be, though really disappointed me. Overall, it's a book that does a good job of weaving together the backstory of that infamous YT-1300 freighter that we know now as the Millennium Falcon. What we want to look at this time is not the continuity background of where the Millennium Falcon came from or what owners it had, but to actually look at the Millennium Falcon itself through a new publication recently released written by Ryder Wyndham entitled The Millennium Falcon, a 3D Owner's Guide. Now, to preface this, a few years ago, one of those bookstores or one of those book companies that likes to sell stuff to teachers for use in their classrooms set up shop with a series of items that were being sent into the school where I teach. So every now and then you would go into the media center, the library, and there'd be this big old setup of all these different books that were being put out there for sale. And if you wanted to buy some, you could place an order. They'd come in relatively quickly, but it was all stuff that was meant to be used in the classroom. Now you would think, me being someone who teaches predominantly world history, economics, and other social studies courses, I would have focused on just things from those particular fields. But even though I'm not very good at many scientific aspects of education, I'm not very well versed in scientific fields except for the theoretical stuff you see in science fiction, quite frankly, which is rather ironic, I suppose, being more into the fictional side of science than the real-life side of science. A big chunk of my family is in medical fields. A lot of people on my dad's side, my sister being a nurse, my dad being a veterinarian, my stepmother being a vet tech, and so forth. I've got an aunt who's a nurse, and so on and so on. I have a lot of people in my family who have ties into medical fields. So when I saw a particular item sitting there on that shelf of things that you could buy, I snatched it up even though I would not have a use for it in my classroom. That item was Uncover the Human Body. What fascinated me about this was that as you go through and read about the human body, each time you turn the page, it does a cutaway of this body, skeleton body, there in the center. So the first page just uncovers it, then you have the skeletal system, but then it takes the skull and the ribs in such a way, and underneath now you see the digestive system, but then the next page takes the digestive system away, and you're at the urinary system, and then you change it again, and there's your circulatory system, and again for the respiratory system, and so on until you're finally left with just the nervous system, with the brain and the spine, and so forth. Okay? So this really fascinated me. And I remember thinking it was really cool, and I wish there were more things out there like this that were more physical. A lot of times you'll see in textbooks, if there's something they need to do a cutaway on, they might have transparency pages that overlay each other, and you turn one page and it shows what's underneath, you turn the next page, it shows what's underneath that. But that's just little transparent pages in a textbook. It's not really something quite as hands-on or as visually stunning as something like this, Uncover the Human Body, written, for those of you who are interested, by Luann Colombo. That's L-U-A-N-N, last name C-O-L-O-M-B-O. This was something that I picked up, and I felt it was a pretty good purchase, even though it was almost $25 at the time. But I remember thinking it'd be nice to see more things like this on other subjects that I was interested in. How was I to know that years later we would see a Star Wars publication much like this? You wouldn't think you'd see something like that with Star Wars. It's not like we're looking inside what a Rodian's guts look like or anything like that. It seemed as though that was something where we wouldn't see a Star Wars item like that, because if we were going to see inside something, with Star Wars it tended to be those visual guides, or the Incredible Cross-Sections books, blueprints books. We would see what things looked like through cutaways, but not a physical cutaway model of any kind, but just images that happen to have chunks cut away from it so you could see inside, again, as in the Incredible Cross-Sections books. But if there was one vehicle in all of Star Wars that is so iconic that it might be able to actually justify a project like this one for a Star Wars book, it would have to be our buddy, the Millennium Falcon. Hear me, baby? You're old and vintage. Please hold together. What did we get? In much the same vein as Uncover the Human Body, we get Millennium Falcon, a 3D owner's guide by Ryder Wyndham, with art by Chris Travas and Chris Reef, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hopefully I am. Both of them who are also veterans of the Essential Atlas. What we have here is very much like Uncover the Human Body. Instead of the Millennium Falcon here being a model, it's not a plastic model. It's basically, this book is produced on this really heavy stock of almost cardboard, basically. And because it is so thick for each individual page, they can have pieces attached to it coming out from it that are basically cutaways, sliced away sections that are flush with these thick pages. And those cutaway parts, kind of like the transparencies in a textbook, are overlaid on top of each other to give us a cutaway Millennium Falcon. So as we go through, we'll move to, for instance, armaments. And they'll tell us all about the armaments. But then we take the page and we move it, and we cut away a little bit more inside the Millennium Falcon. And then we're looking at sensors. We cut away again. We cut away again. And again. And again. Over. And over. And over. And over. Each time getting deeper and deeper into the Millennium Falcon until we're completely done and looking at open space. Each step tells us a little bit more about the inner workings of the Millennium Falcon and the parts of the Millennium Falcon that we are looking at. Like, as I said, these cutaways here, things like this one. As you can see, it's this heavy cardstock, and each cutaway piece is attached to the rest of the main page, but it's done so with as little necessary extra bits as possible, like these little tabs here, so that it does stand out as something that looks like a cutaway, not something that's just missing parts out of a particular piece of cardstock. Also of interest, as we cut away here and we look on this side, you would think that what we'd be getting is just blank pages or something as we're turning it, because of course, this is our Millennium Falcon cutaway, this is what we're paying attention to, right? Au contraire, as you turn, you'll find that they have also illustrated the bottom of each part. And on the following side, or the facing side, excuse me, I'm having a very hard time holding this correctly. As you do this, as you turn the pages, not only are you seeing on this side the Millennium Falcon being cut away, on this side you are seeing the Millennium Falcon being essentially built from the bottom until we see the bottom of the Millennium Falcon there at the end when looking at the hull. From the standpoint of information, most of it is in these little blurbs like these. Okay? It's not like we're looking at a heavy technical manual or anything like that. We have a decent amount of information being given frequently through these little boxes, along with some basic information up there at the top, and of course we're matching up what we're reading to what we're seeing on the Millennium Falcon here, or the Millennium Falcon's parts over here. It's really well designed so that as you turn the pages, whatever it is it's talking about matches up with whichever side of the Millennium Falcon we're looking at, top side view or bottom up view. Broadly speaking, it's not nearly as fragile as you would think that it is, though it's still not something I would necessarily give to a little kid unless you know you're willing to let them bang it up just a little bit. This is definitely something I would recommend for adults, certainly something I recommend to any fan of the Millennium Falcon. Expect that it's basically going to be probably the only thing we'll ever see of its kind. It's a unique Star Wars collector's item here. Now, if you were to go purchase it, this thing is again, just like Uncover the Human Body, it's right around $25. In this case, it is $21.99. $299 at retail price. However, you can find it much cheaper, almost half of that price, at places like Amazon. So for something that only costs about $22 to begin with, and that you can probably get for probably more around like, what, 13, 14, 15 bucks or so at most, depending on where you go shop online, this item here, if you're a Millennium Falcon fan, if you're a Star Wars fan who likes technical stuff, who likes to see cutaways of items, whether it's Star Wars or otherwise, this is an absolute no-brainer purchase. It is one of the coolest Star Wars guidebook style productions that I've seen in a long time. It makes for a great Star Wars coffee table book, so to speak. Still, would it have been nice to have more of a plastic model like we see with Uncover the Human Body? Maybe, but imagine how high the price would have had to have gotten, and imagine how thick this thing would have had to have been to make that happen. Not to mention the fact that the way that things cut away here, you see cutaways of the full ship at any given time. I'm not sure that a plastic model would have been able to do that justice without having a lot less detail than what we're seeing with these sort of cardboard style cutaways with the individual thick pages here. So again, Star Wars, Millennium Falcon, a 3D owner's guide, a no-brainer purchase if you are into Star Wars stuff. Ryder Wyndham does a great job. The artists do a great job with this thing. I would highly recommend it to any Star Wars fan, but particularly those who are obsessed with the Millennium Falcon and those who perhaps did not mind the oddball ending of the novel. If you're fascinated enough with the Millennium Falcon that you felt like this was awesome despite that rather lackluster ending, this thing should be already on your bookshelves, quite frankly. Otherwise, get your continuity about the Millennium Falcon here, and get your technical details right here. Incredible Cross Sections has nothing on this, at least when it comes to the Millennium Falcon. With that, I'll wrap this up. Stay tuned for more episodes of the Visual Showcase here on the Facebook page for the EU Review. Good night, everybody.